It's December 26, 2003, the day after Christmas, and somewhere on a lonely stretch of road in Anambra State, Nigeria, a convoy is moving fast. Gunshots erupt from the bushes, bullets tear through the air like thunder. Metal tears, security agents dive for cover, and one single bullet pierces straight through the windscreen, rips through a woman's scarf. Now, here's what makes this story different from every other assassination attempt you've heard. Most people would have disappeared, would have resigned, would have left quietly, walked away, and thank God they were still breathing. She didn't. A few days later, she went straight back to work because Dora Akunyili believed something terrified the people. She believed that fake drugs were killing more Nigerians than bullets could ever, and people behind that trade were making billions. This is the story of the woman who declared war on counterfeit medicine, who survived gunmen, threats, political pressure, and criminal cartels, and who refused, absolutely refused, to surrender. Before she became one of the most celebrated women in African history, Dora Akunyili was just a girl with a sharp mind and an even sharper conscience. She was born Dora Edumobi on July 14, 1954 in Makurdi, Nigeria, raised in a disciplined academic family that believed deeply in education. And Dora took that belief seriously. Scholarship followed her everywhere. She didn't just attend school, she excelled, eventually earning a PhD in pharmacology from the University of Nigeria in Nsukka. People who knew her described her as calm, deeply religious, and uncomfortably honest. The kind of person who made other people feel slightly embarrassed about the small lies they told themselves every day. She became a pharmacist, a lecturer, a wife and mother, a woman building a good life. But in 1988, everything changed. Dora's younger sister, Vivian, was diabetic, which on its own is hard enough. But Vivian had access to treatment. She was getting insulin injections, this medication that keeps diabetic patients alive, the medication that should have kept her alive. Except, the insulin was fake, counterfeit, manufactured by someone somewhere who decided that profit mattered more than a human life. Vivian died. She was only in her 20s. Let that sit with you for a moment. Not a car accident, not a disease that medicine could fight, not poverty, but fake drug. Someone looked at a diabetic young woman and sold her family poison in a packaging of medicine. Dora never fully recovered from that loss. Years later, decades later, she would still speak out about Vivian with visible emotion. Because for her, the fake drug crisis was never an abstract policy problem. It was never statistics on a report. Every counterfeit tablet had a face. Every fake injection was somebody's child, somebody's sister, somebody's future. And at that time, Nigeria was drowning in counterfeit medicine. Hospitals unknowingly administered contaminated IV drips. Expired drugs were repackaged with fresh labels and resold. Some medicine contained nothing but chalk. Some had zero active ingredients. Others were outright poison dressed up in professional package. The World Health Organization had raised alarms. People were dying silently. Families blamed themselves or blamed God. And most never even knew that treatment had been sabotaged even before it reached their hands. By the late 1990s, Dora Akunyili had already built a quiet but powerful reputation. Not for politics, not for connections, for one thing, integrity. And in Nigeria's public sector, in any country's public sector, honestly, that kind of reputation is rare, enough to be almost mythological. There's one story that people still tell about her. The Nigerian government once sponsored Dora for a medical trip abroad. Thousands of pounds were set aside for surgery she reportedly needed. But after a thorough examination overseas, the doctors told her she didn't actually need the operation. Now, most people in that situation, they stay quiet. They enjoy the trip, maybe do some shopping. Nobody has to know. But Dora Akunyili came back and returned every single penny. That story circulated. It reached powerful people. including Nigerian's president at the time, Olusegun Obasanjo. In 2001, NAFDAC, Nigeria's National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, was in serious trouble. The agency existed technically. On paper, it had a mandate, but in reality, the counterfeit drug trade was operating almost openly. Drug barons had connections, money, protection for people inside the very system designed to stop them. Some NAFDAC officials were compromised, others were openly afraid. The agency had become, in many ways, a performance of regulation rather than regulation itself. Then Dora Akunyili received the call. She was offered the position of Director General of NAFDAC. At first glance, honestly, at every glance, this sounded like an impossible assignment. Nigeria's fake drug market was enormous. The criminals behind it were ruthless, and the very institutions she was being handed had already been hollowed out from the inside. But she accepted, not because she thought it would be easy, but because to Dora Akunyili, this was not about politics. This was not about career advancements. This was not about a title or a salary or prestige. She later described counterfeit drugs as mass murder. And from the moment she stepped through the doors of NAFDAC, the war began. Dora Akunyili did something that officials before her had consistently failed to do. She attacked the system directly. No slow meetings, no bureaucratic delay tactics, no waiting for the right moment. NAFDAC agents stormed warehouses. Open-air markets were raided. Counterfeit drugs worth millions of naira were seized and then publicly destroyed on camera so the country could see it happen. Television stations broadcast warnings. Radio jingles educated ordinary Nigerians about how to identify fake medicine. She launched public campaigns that spoke directly to consumers, mothers buying medicine for their children, to patients who had always simply trusted what was handed to them. For the first time, ordinary Nigerians were told, ask questions, read the label, be suspicious, and then she made one of her most consequential decisions. She restricted pharmaceutical imports to a small number of designated airports and seaports where proper inspections could actually happen. She blacklisted companies with verified links to counterfeit production. She put pressure on foreign manufacturers in India, in China, everywhere, who were flooding the Nigerian market with dangerous products. This was no longer symbolic. This was a direct assault on a criminal industry worth billions. And the cartels responded exactly the way you would expect powerful criminals to respond. When the money is threatened, threats started arriving, anonymous phone calls, warnings, intimidation. NAFDAC offices were attacked, so facilities were burned to the ground. Staff members were targeted. The messages from the cartels was clear. Back down or we will make you. But Dora Akunyili did not back down. She escalated. She pushed harder. She kept showing up. Then came December 26, 2003. The ambush we opened with. Gunmen hidden in the bushes. A convoy moving through Anambra State. The sudden eruption of gunfire. The bullets that grazed her scalp and left her alive. Barely. Think about what the attack was really saying. This wasn't a random crime. This was a calculated message. We know who you are, we know where you travel, and next time, we won't miss. Her husband, Dr. Chike Akunyili, was reportedly terrified for her. Friends begged her to resign. Colleagues warned her. She was risking her life for a system that may not be savable. The pressure on her to walk away was immense, and yet, every time she thought about quitting, she remembered Vivian. She remembered the face of her little sister. She remembered an insulin injection that should have been medicine. And then she decided, again, that she could not stop, would not stop. Here is part of the story that often gets lost in the drama of assassination attempts and burning officers. The work was actually working, slowly, steadily. Something extraordinary began to happen. Public awareness increased. Counterfeit networks became harder to operate in the open. More products were being tested and exposed. And then the numbers. Before Dora Akunyili took over NAFDAC, estimates suggested that somewhere between 70 and 80% of drugs circulating in Nigeria were either counterfeit or substandard. Let the numbers sink in. 7 or 8 out of every 10 medicines potentially killing or failing the people who took them. Within a few years of her leadership, that figure repeatedly dropped dramatically. Not to zero. Progress in a system that is entrenched is never clean, but the difference was real, measurable, life-saving, and the world started paying attention. Nigeria, a country that had become internationally synonymous with the counterfeit drug problem, was suddenly being studied as a model for enforcement. Time magazine named Dora Akunyili one of their heroes of our time. Transparency International honored her courage. Global health organizations cited her methods. Universities around the world invited her to speak. At home, Nigeria gave her a name she would carry for the rest of her life, the Iron Lady. And the reason that nickname landed so hard, the reason it meant something, is this. Everyone knew the system was broken. Everyone could see the corruption. Everyone understood the risk. Very few people were willing to stand up and confront it with their name, their face, and their life on the line. But she did, repeatedly over the years. In the face of everything, this is not politics. This is not ambition. This is something rarer. This is conviction. In 2008, Dora Akunyili moved into another chapter of public service. She was appointed Nigerian's Minister of Information and Communications. She was, at this point, already a national icon. She had come to believe that the fake drug crisis, as catastrophic as it was a symptom of something deeper, something more pervasive, a crisis of national confidence, a crisis of identity. So she launched an initiative called Good People, Great Nation. The concept on the surface sounds simple, almost naive. The idea was that Nigeria could not move forward, truly move forward, if its own citizens had stopped believing in their country. If corruption had so thoroughly damaged the national image that patriotism itself felt like a joke. She wanted Nigerians to understand that integrity wasn't weakness. That honestly wasn't naivety. That's a country's character that is built from the choices of its individual people. For some observers, the campaign was idealistic, maybe even disconnected from the grinding realities of corruption and poverty. But for the Nigerians who had watched Dora Akunyili survive an assassination attempt and then walk back into her office the following week, it didn't sound idealistic at all. It sounded like a woman who lived what she preached. This was someone who returned government money when she was never asked to return it. Someone who refused bribes even when accepting them would have been invisible and profitable. Someone who looked government in the eye, metaphorically and literally, and kept moving forward. She wasn't asking Nigerians to be perfect. She wasn't asking them to try. She only asked them to choose integrity when they had the chance, to believe that their individual choices were building something or destroying it. Over the years, recognitions accumulated around her name. Some reports put it at over 900 awards. Others say more than 1,000 honors. But behind all that recognition, if you read her interviews from these years, you would eventually come back to the same thing. A pharmacist, a sister who died too young, a fake injection, and a grief that became a mission. After surviving criminal cartels, assassination attempts, political pressure, and a decade of institutional warfare, Dora Akunyili faced her final enemy. And this one she could not outwork. She was diagnosed with cancer. For years, rumors about her health had circulated publicly in Nigeria, but she continued to appear. She kept speaking, she kept showing up, she kept working, even as her body carried what it was carrying. Until June 7th, 2014, Nigeria woke up to the news Dora Akunyili was gone. The country mourned, not in the way countries mourn politicians, not in a performatory, mandatory press release kind of way. People felt it because they understood in a way that it is sometimes hard to put words around exactly what they had lost. This was not a leader who had accumulated power and used it for herself. This was not someone who had bent the rules quietly while making public speeches about bending them. This was a woman who had bled for ordinary Nigerians, who had put her body, literally her physical body, between criminals and the people who those criminals were poisoning, and who asked for nothing in return except that people stay safe. Some leaders are remembered for power, for battles they won, for the money they made in the office or the office they held. Dora Akunyili is remembered because she protected human life, because she fought for people who didn't even know what they needed or what she was fighting for, because she turned one devastating personal loss into a public act of love that lasted for decades. Today, millions of Nigerians may not fully realize how dangerous things once were. If you were born after the mid-2000s, you grew up in a country where the worst of the counterfeit drug crisis had already passed, where pharmacies had some level of real oversight, where medicine, imperfect as the system still is, had at least been fought for. But older Nigerians remember. They remember the fear, the uncertainty, going to a pharmacy and not knowing, genuinely not knowing if what you were buying would help or hurt. Stories of treatments that changed nothing, of drugs that did nothing, or of people who died because they sought medical help. And standing in the middle of that darkness, there was a woman who decided that silence was not acceptable, not because she was fearless. She was afraid. You'd have to be. But she believed that the cost of her fear, the cost of staying quiet, the cost of walking away will be measured in human lives. So she chose the harder thing again and again and again. Dora Akunyili did not just fight counterfeit drugs. She fought the culture that allowed them. She fought the greed that manufactured them. She fought the fear that protected them. She fought on behalf of every Nigerian who deserved to take their medicine and take better. The cartels tried the threats, they tried fire, they even tried bullets. None of this worked because she had already decided the day she buried her sister Vivian that she would and would not be the kind of person who would look away. And long after the gunshot faded into memory, Nigeria still remembers the woman who refused to bow.